What do you hold on to when the people who raised you are the ones who never truly saw you, and the legacy you've devoted your life to becomes the very thing used to keep you small? Stay with me. I'm Emily Harper, as I take you back to the moment everything I believed about family, success, and loyalty started to fall apart. This is a story about betrayal, about reclaiming the space they said wasn't yours, and finding the courage to build something even greater in the ashes they left behind. I'm Emily Harper, 34, born and raised in Brookline, just outside Boston. I'm a Harvard Law grad, a senior attorney at Harper & Sons, the firm my grandfather founded, the same one I've spent most of my adult life helping to grow. On paper, I've done everything right. But when your last name is Harper and your older brother is James, the golden boy, the rules are different. It all started a few months ago, though I didn't know it then. I just thought it was another late night at the office. The building was nearly empty. Most of the lights on our floor had already been turned off, leaving only the soft glow of my desk lamp and the ambient city light slipping through the tall windows. I was surrounded by stacks of deposition transcripts and red folders with crisp Post-its in my handwriting. The quiet hum of the heater mixed with the faint ticking of my analog desk clock. 9:47 p.m. On the wall in front of me were 3 framed photographs. Grandpa Charles with his silver-rimmed glasses and a scowl that somehow felt affectionate, Dad in his prime, shaking hands with a senator, and one of me and James, age 7 and 9, sitting on the courthouse steps in our Sunday best. Even then, he was leaning slightly forward, chin lifted, like he already knew the world would listen when he spoke. I reached for my mug of lukewarm green tea and sipped. My other hand rested on the printout of our strategy proposal for the firm's 75th anniversary gala. I'd spent weeks pulling it together, a comprehensive vision for expanding Harper & Sons practice areas, bringing in international clients, and elevating our digital presence. This wasn't just about a celebration. It was supposed to be my moment. I had the numbers, the wins, the seniority, but still there was this tightness in my chest, a familiar question echoing at the edge of my thoughts. Would it matter? Or would they only see James again? That feeling of always being almost enough has followed me for as long as I can remember. When I was 9, I won the statewide spelling bee. My dad, William, missed it because James had a soccer tournament. "You know your brother's team might make nationals," he said, ruffling my hair like that would soothe the sting. When I got into Harvard Law, he sent a congratulatory email, forwarded from his secretary. Meanwhile, when James got a C-suite internship at a hedge fund that went under in 6 months, Dad called it visionary risk-taking. Even now, James's office sat just across the hall from mine, bigger, of course, and decorated like a boardroom from a 90s legal drama. I'd passed by earlier that evening and noticed he'd already left. No files open, no documents on his desk, just a bottle of Macallan 18 and 2 tumblers. I went back to reviewing the client list for the gala, carefully annotating our growth sectors. But part of me couldn't help drifting, back to the lunch meeting 2 days ago when I overheard Dad say to a partner, "James has the leadership spark. Emily's solid, don't get me wrong. But James? He's a visionary." I'd smiled at them when I entered the room, pretended I hadn't heard, but it hit harder than I expected. I'd closed more cases than anyone else in the firm this year, brought in 2 Fortune 500 clients. I'd trained our newest batch of junior associates. But when your father is also your boss, and your brother the heir apparent, merit has a strange way of getting redefined. I shook myself out of the spiral, stood, and crossed the room to the whiteboard. On it, I'd mapped out the gala presentation: opening, firm history, current growth, vision 2030. I stared at the final section for a moment. Legacy, I murmured to myself, capping and uncapping the marker in my hand. My handwriting was bold, centered, but something about it felt hollow. Outside, the city glowed. Brake lights shimmered in slow-moving rows down Commonwealth Avenue. I watched a man below step out of a black town car, hand a bouquet of white lilies to someone waiting by the curb. She smiled, touched his cheek. The clock ticked again. 10:06. I sat back down and pulled out the final page of the proposal, the one with my personal note to the partners. A gentle but firm case for considering me for a leadership role. I'd rewritten it 6 times, every word balanced between confident and respectful, ambitious but deferential. The kind of tightrope women-in-law walk every day. But even as I read it again, a part of me winced. Was I asking or begging? Just then, my phone buzzed. A text from James. "Gala's gonna be great. Don't stress too much about your slides. Dad's handling the big stuff." No punctuation, no warmth, just James, smug as always. I stared at the screen for a beat. My fingers hovered above the keyboard, then dropped. I powered the phone off. That was the moment, I think, the first flicker of something deeper than disappointment. Not quite anger, not yet, but a shift. I had always believed that if I worked hard enough, they'd have to see me, have to acknowledge the years I'd given, the loyalty, the wins, the sleepless nights. But what if they never would? What if they'd already decided? Still, I clung to hope. Maybe, just maybe, the gala would change something. Maybe Dad would see what I was trying to build. I gathered my papers, slid them into my briefcase, and turned off the lamp. The room dimmed, shadows stretching across the floor like quiet doubts. As the elevator doors closed, I whispered to my reflection in the brushed steel, "This is your shot, Emily. Don't let them take it from you." I believed that. I really did. I thought the gala would be my moment to shine. How wrong I was. The night of the gala shimmered with that kind of forced perfection only money can buy. The ballroom at the Langford Hotel in downtown Boston had been transformed. Gold-draped tables, cascading centerpieces of ivory orchids and calla lilies, champagne flutes glinting under the soft chandeliers. A live jazz trio played in the corner, their melodies smooth but distant like background noise to a world I wasn't sure I belonged to anymore. I stood near the back wall watching guests arrive. Judges, alumni, corporate clients, even politicians. I wore a floor-length black silk gown, simple, sharp. My hair was pulled into a low twist. Not too soft, not too severe. I'd practiced my opening speech more times than I could count. But my hands still felt cold. James walked in 15 minutes late, of course, smiling, shaking hands, dressed like a man born to take the stage. His tuxedo wasn't standard issue. It had clearly been tailored overseas, likely Milan. Dad trailed just behind, laughing too loudly at some joke I couldn't hear. They didn't notice me. My fingers tightened around the stem of my glass. At 8:05, the MC tapped the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats for the presentation segment of our evening." This was it. I moved toward the stage, heels clicking steadily against the marble floor. My folder was tucked under my arm, the slideshow cued. When I passed Dad's table, he didn't even glance up, just murmured something to a partner beside him. I took a breath and stepped into the spotlight. "Good evening, I'm Emily Harper, Senior Litigation Counsel at Harper & Sons. Tonight, as we celebrate 75 years of legacy, I want to talk not just about where we've been, but where we're going." The first few lines flowed easily. I'd built this presentation like a case brief, clean, direct, undeniable. The audience leaned in. A few even nodded, impressed. I caught Olivia Grant's eye in the second row. She offered the smallest smile. That meant more than she probably knew. Slides clicked behind me. International partnership strategies, a new diversity recruitment initiative, expansion into emerging markets. When I closed with, "The next 75 years should honor our past, but they must be led with courage," the applause came like a tide, loud, long. I stepped back, heart pounding. Then Dad rose from his seat and made his way to the podium. "Thank you, Emily," he said with a nod that barely grazed acknowledgement. "Beautifully put." Something in his tone made me pause. There was an edge of dismissal, like he was thanking a secretary for setting up the room. He turned to the crowd. "It's remarkable to see how far Harper & Sons has come. My father built this firm with his bare hands and a vision, and I've done my best to carry that forward. But as we look to the future, every great legacy needs a great leader." My stomach went cold. "No, not here. Not like this." He smiled wider. "Which is why I'm proud to announce that starting this quarter, our new CEO will be my son, James Harper." The applause was instant. Too instant. It was rehearsed. I didn't move. My hands rested against the back of a chair. A single beat too long. I heard the camera shutters. The photographers had turned toward James, catching the handshake, the family embrace. I wasn't in the frame, not even close. My cheeks burned, but my expression didn't change. I'd trained myself too well. I just clapped, softly, politely, while something inside me cracked. I slipped away during dessert. No one noticed. The hallway outside the ballroom was colder, quieter. I found a side corridor with a half-shuttered bar and leaned against the polished wood. The smell of whiskey and lemon oil clung to the air. I pulled out my phone, glanced at it. No messages, no missed calls, just silence. I thought about law school graduation, the empty seat Dad left because James had some fraternity reunion. I thought about the senior partner pitch meeting I prepared that James took credit for. I thought about every time I swallowed my pride because I believed it would pay off. I'd given everything to this firm, to this family, but it was never enough. I didn't even realize someone had followed me until I heard heels. I figured I'd find you here. I turned. Olivia Grant. She was holding 2 flutes of champagne. She handed one to me. "Nice presentation," she said. I gave a thin smile. Didn't seem to matter. She shrugged. "You moved the room. That's what matters. But that family of yours..." She tilted her head. "You're too good for their games, Emily. Don't let them define you." I stared at her. She wasn't trying to be kind. She was telling me something I wasn't ready to hear. "What if it's not a game?" I said quietly. "What if this is just who they are and who I'll never be?" Olivia's gaze didn't flinch. "Then maybe it's time you start playing by your own rules." She walked away before I could respond. I finished the champagne in one bitter swallow. When I returned to the ballroom, James was posing for a group photo with Dad and the other partners. The banner behind them read, "A legacy that endures." I stood at the edge of the crowd. No one turned to look at me. I could have cried, could have screamed, could have disappeared, but I didn't. I just watched, quietly, steadily, and let the truth settle like dust around me. They had made their choice, and maybe, just maybe, it was time I made mine. The next morning, the firm felt colder than usual, or maybe I just saw it differently now, without the illusion. I arrived early, as always. The lobby marble gleamed under the fluorescent lights, polished to perfection. A fresh tray of croissants sat untouched near reception, and the faint buzz of the espresso machine echoed down the hall. It all looked exactly the same, and yet, everything had changed. I stepped into the elevator alone, gripping my bag like a shield. When the doors slid open on the 17th floor, the silence hit harder. No nods, no morning greetings, just the sound of my heels on the hardwood floor. James's office door was cracked open. Of course it was. He always liked people to see him in action. I didn't knock. He was on a call, but when he saw me walk in, he raised a single finger. "Hold on," he said into the phone, then placed it face down on his desk without muting. "Morning," he said too casually. "Coffee's fresh." I stared at him. "You could have told me." He blinked. "Told you what?" My voice was calm but sharp. "That Dad was naming you CEO, that everything we've worked for, everything I've built here, was already decided behind my back." James leaned back in his chair, fingers laced behind his neck like he was settling in for a performance. "It wasn't personal, Em." I laughed, once, dry. "That's funny, because it sure feels personal when your own brother lets you walk on stage like a fool to pitch a vision that'll never be yours to lead." He tilted his head, gave me that maddening half-smile. "You were great last night. You made the firm look good. Everyone said so." I took a step forward. "That's not what this is about, and you know it." For a brief second, something flickered in his eyes. Guilt? Pity? I couldn't tell. Then it vanished. "You've always been intense," he said. "Precise, brilliant even, but you're not exactly what clients expect when they think of Harper leadership." I froze. "What the hell does that mean?" James stood slowly. "You come on too strong. You challenge people. You're not afraid to make them uncomfortable. That's admirable in court, but it scares the board. Scares Dad, too, if we're honest." My hands curled into fists at my sides. "You convinced him, didn't you?" I whispered. "You told him I'd be bad for business." He didn't deny it. Instead, he walked to the window, staring out at the city like he didn't just gut me. "I just helped him see the big picture. You've always been better behind the scenes, Em. The engine. I'm just... the face." I swallowed the lump rising in my throat. My voice came out tight. You stole my life's work with a smile. How do you sleep at night?" James turned back, eyes colder now. "It's not theft if it was never yours to begin with." And that was it. The last thread snapped. I turned without another word and walked out. I didn't go to my office. I didn't answer calls. I didn't even think. I just walked, fast and angry, until the wind hit my face and the chill of early March Boston bit into my skin. I found myself at a park bench across from the courthouse, the same one where that photo of James and me was taken years ago, us as kids, side by side, in tiny blazers and shiny shoes. Back then, I thought we were equals. I thought we were a team. How blind I was. The wind rustled through the bare branches above, and somewhere in the distance, a siren wailed. I didn't move. I just stared ahead, trying to breathe. Everything hurt. Not just the betrayal, but the realization that I had handed them every piece of me, every late night, every win, every ounce of loyalty, and they had never even considered me. I wasn't overlooked. I was erased. The tears came then, slow and silent. I wiped them away with the back of my hand, angry at myself for crying over people who wouldn't have shed a tear for me. My phone buzzed. Olivia. "Meet me for coffee. I've been where you are." I stared at the message. There was no emoji, no filler, just that. I didn't respond, not yet. Instead, I let myself sit in the ache a little longer, in the raw truth of it all. I remembered a moment in high school, a debate tournament I won against the odds. I came home beaming, trophy in hand. Dad barely looked up from his newspaper. "James scored 2 goals today," he'd said. Like that was supposed to impress me. I'd laughed it off back then. Told myself I'd show them one day. But what happens when the one day comes and no one cares? I looked down at my reflection in the phone screen. Red eyes, hollow cheeks, a woman unraveling. And yet, there was something else there. A flicker, a spark. Maybe Olivia was right. Maybe this wasn't the end. Maybe this was the moment everything changed. I stood slowly, brushing the bench dust from my coat. The courthouse loomed behind me, old stone, stubborn and proud, like the men who ran it. I wasn't ready to go back inside just yet. But I wasn't walking away either, not anymore. Because if they wouldn't make space for me at their table, maybe it was time I built my own. I took a breath, opened the message, and typed 2 words. "Where at?" And just like that, something shifted. The storm wasn't over. Far from it. But for the first time, I wasn't afraid of it anymore. The cafe Olivia chose wasn't the kind of place where lawyers from Beacon Hill usually spent their mornings. It was tucked into a quiet corner of Cambridge, away from the bustle of the city. Exposed brick walls, oversized windows streaked with early spring rain, a smell of espresso beans and something cinnamon sweet curling through the air. Baristas moved with the kind of lazy precision that said, "We don't do rush here." I spotted her instantly. Olivia Grant sat near the back in a leather booth under a hanging fern. No makeup, gray cashmere turtleneck, reading glasses perched low on her nose as she scrolled through her phone. She looked exactly like the woman who once made senior partner at Harper & Sons in record time, and the same woman who'd left just as quickly, her exit never explained. She looked up as I approached, then slid a cup across the table toward me. "Chamomile, you look like you haven't slept." I sat, wrapping both hands around the mug. She was right, I hadn't slept, not really. "I appreciate you reaching out," I said, voice low. Olivia tilted her head. I remember that look, hollowed out, like someone took your nameplate off the door and replaced it with silence. I gave a bitter smile. That's one way to put it. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Rain traced lazy lines down the window beside us. A couple at the next table laughed softly over pastries. The quiet felt safe, safer than anything had in weeks. "I used to think if I was good enough," I said finally, "they'd have no choice but to see me, recognize me, let me lead." Olivia stirred her tea. "Let me guess. You hit all the marks, stayed late, billed higher, covered for others. You were excellent, so they moved the goalpost." I looked at her. "Yes." She met my gaze and said without flinching, "That's not excellence they're rewarding, Emily. It's obedience." Her words hit me in the chest like a blunt instrument. I sat back, staring at the steam rising from my tea. Something hot stirred behind my ribs. Anger, maybe, or shame, or the beginnings of something stronger. I watched you at the gala, she continued. You had the room. You had vision. But more than that, you had backbone. You made them nervous. And they don't promote what they can't control. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. So what am I supposed to do? Walk away from everything I've built? Let James win? Who says walking away is losing? Olivia asked. Sometimes the only way to win is to stop playing the game and start your own. She said it so casually, like it wasn't the most terrifying idea I'd ever heard. I can't just start a firm, I said. Not alone. You wouldn't be, she replied. You've already built a reputation. You've earned respect, not just from clients, but from people inside Harper who are watching how you handle this. Quietly. But they're watching. I blinked. She reached into her bag and slid a business card across the table. Clean serif font, no logo, just Sarah Mitchell, venture capitalist. She specializes in funding female-led startups, legal tech, boutique firms. She's been looking for someone like you. I stared at the card like it was a loaded weapon. Olivia sipped her tea. You don't have to call her today, or tomorrow. But don't wait so long that your anger becomes resignation. My voice came out hoarse. What if I fail? She smiled. Then you fail doing something that matters, something you chose, and that's still a better legacy than being the ghost in your father's office. The silence between us this time wasn't heavy. It was clarifying. I leaned back and let my eyes drift to the window. Outside, the rain had eased. A break in the clouds let a single shaft of light fall across the street. The world felt strangely still, like it was waiting for me to decide. I thought about everything I had to lose, the name, the security, the legacy I once believed belonged to me. But maybe that was the trick. The legacy was never truly mine. I was chasing a story written by men who only saw me as a footnote. What if I wrote my own? Olivia stood. Take your time, but not too much. You already know the answer. You're just scared to say it out loud. I stood with her. Thank you, I said. Really. She touched my shoulder lightly. Don't thank me. Just don't let them win. Then she was gone. I stayed in the booth a while longer, staring at the card. My reflection flickered in the window. Tired eyes, tightened jaw, a woman on the verge. I pulled out my phone, scrolled through contacts, hesitated, then opened notes and typed, Liberty Legal, Vision. The first words came slowly, then faster. A firm that honors excellence over ego, a place where talent isn't muted by tradition, where the boardroom welcomes dissent, not silences it, where young women see themselves not as assistants to power, but power itself. I didn't even realize I was crying until a tear smudged the screen. Not from sadness, from something else entirely. Hope. I saved the note and slipped the card into my wallet. Later that night, I sat on the edge of my bed in sweatpants, laptop open, blinking cursor waiting. I started a folder. Liberty Legal, Drafts. Then I opened a new document. The title bar read, Business Plan, Phase 1. I didn't know how it would end. Didn't know if I'd get funding or staff or even make it past year 1. But I knew this. I wasn't going back. Not to silence, not to being used, not to letting the legacy my name carried drown out the woman I had become. Because Olivia was right. If they won't give you a seat at the table, you build your own. And I was ready to get to work. But before I could move forward, I had to make one call to a woman who held the key to the next step, and maybe the fight of my life. The first time I walked into Sarah Mitchell's office, I felt like I was trespassing in someone else's future. The walls were floor-to-ceiling glass, 35 stories above Midtown Manhattan, sleek, understated furniture, minimalist art, no distractions, just clean lines and quiet power. I stood in the reception area, smoothing the front of my blazer like I could press confidence into the fabric. I'd barely sat down before the door opened. "Emily?" the woman asked, stepping out with the ease of someone who ran the world before noon. Sarah Mitchell was nothing like I'd imagined. No-nonsense pantsuit, yes, but paired with Converse sneakers. Her hair was cropped short, silver at the temples, and her gaze was sharp enough to cut through pretense in seconds. "Come in," she said, gesturing casually. Her office had no desk, just 2 low chairs, a coffee table between them, and a pitcher of lemon water. She poured a glass for each of us and got straight to it. "So," she said, "you want to start a law firm?" Not a question, a challenge. I nodded. "A boutique litigation firm, focused on corporate ethics, whistleblower protection, and international equity disputes." Sarah raised a brow, amused. "That's ambitious." "I know. And personal." I hesitated, then said, "Also that." She tapped a finger on her glass. "Tell me why you walked away from Harper & Sons." I didn't rehearse my answer. I didn't need to. Because I realized I was never going to be allowed to lead, no matter how qualified I was. They wanted my brilliance, not my voice. I gave them 15 years. They gave my brother a crown. Sarah leaned back, eyes narrowing just slightly. "So this isn't about revenge?" I shook my head. "It's about liberation." She smiled at that. "Good, because revenge burns out fast. But vision evolves." She asked about numbers, case wins, management experience. I told her everything. I laid it all out. My plan for phased hiring, our ideal client profile, the 3-year growth trajectory. I even showed her a mock-up of the Liberty legal branding Olivia's designer friend had helped me sketch. At the end of it, she simply said, "You've got teeth. I like that." Then she reached into her folder, slid a term sheet across the table and added, "I'm in." I blinked. "You mean it?" Sarah grinned. "I don't do courtesy meetings. You've already earned your shot. Now go prove it was worth betting on." I left that building with a folder of funding paperwork, a calendar of investor deadlines, and a heartbeat that felt like it belonged to someone reborn. But starting wasn't the hardest part. The hardest part was letting go of the old version of me, the one who waited to be chosen. Back in Boston, my apartment transformed overnight. The dining table became a war room. Sticky notes covered the walls. Timelines, hiring targets, prospective clients. My phone never stopped buzzing. Olivia checked in every morning. Sarah connected me to her legal network. I barely slept, lived on caffeine and adrenaline. I began drafting recruitment letters, not to strangers, but to people I already knew. Associates at Harper & Sons who'd been passed over for promotions. Women who'd led case research but never sat at the strategy table. A junior partner named Priya, who once told me in secret she was tired of polishing the glass ceiling from below. One by one, I met them in cafes, bookstores, parks, and one by one, they said yes. They didn't need convincing. They needed permission to believe in something better. We worked from my living room at first. Laptops on laps, takeout cartons on windowsills, laughter breaking through stress in ways I hadn't heard in years. We ran mock trials on the coffee table, debated policy wording at 2 a.m., and high-fived over small wins. A finalized logo, a signed lease for an office space in Back Bay. Still, at night, when everyone left and the apartment fell quiet, the doubts crept in. What if we crashed? What if I failed? Not just for me, but for them. I'd stare at the ceiling and hear my father's voice in my head. "Leadership isn't about being loud, Emily. It's about stability." But I wasn't loud. I was just done being silent. And maybe what they called unstable was just what change looked like in its early stages. Raw, unpredictable, alive. One night, as I reviewed onboarding paperwork and our initial pitch deck, Sarah called. "I have something for you," she said. "A case." I sat up straighter. "Already?" She sent the file to my email. "It's international. Environmental violations. Multinational corporation. Harper & Sons passed on it last quarter. Called it too risky. I think it's perfect for Liberty." I opened the file. Even on first glance, I could see the outlines of something big, something ugly. Testimonies buried in redacted reports, satellite imagery, whistleblower emails, the kind of case that could ruin lives or rewrite everything. "It'll be hard," Sarah said. "Messy, loud, and very, very public." I stared at the screen, heart thudding. This was it, the case that could launch us or bury us. And all I could think was, they thought I wouldn't dare. I closed the laptop slowly. Then I whispered into the dark like a promise to myself, "Let's go to war." The file sat on my desk for 3 days before I opened it again. Every time I passed it, thick, red-tabbed, wrapped in a branded binder from Mitchell Equity, my chest tightened just a little more. It wasn't fear, not exactly. It was weight, the kind that comes with knowing the next choice you make will define who you are for years to come. On the 4th night, I poured a glass of Cabernet, lit a candle, and finally sat down. The executive summary read like a warning label: KRG International, alleged environmental misconduct, Southeast Asia operations, whistleblower escalation. Buried in the appendices were photos of a mangrove coastline turned to sludge, villagers standing knee-deep in black water, eyes hollow. A pediatric report on abnormal cancer rates. Export logs, contradicting inspection records. And one email, anonymous, begging someone, anyone, to help. Harper and Sons had turned this down. Too politically unstable, too far from their core, too unwinnable. I turned the page slowly, aware that with each word I read, the line between justice and personal vengeance blurred a little more. But I wasn't here for revenge. I was here because this was the kind of case that needed a fight, and I was tired of waiting to be asked to pick up the sword. The next morning, I called a team meeting at Liberty's barely furnished office. We'd just installed our logo on the glass entry, sharp serif font, clean gold lines. It caught the light when you walked past, like a quiet challenge to the world. We gathered around the whiteboard with paper cups of gas station coffee and half-eaten bagels. I have a case, I told them. Our first. I laid out the facts, the risk, the uphill battle, no guaranteed payday, no flashy headlines, just one chance to take on something that mattered. And make a name doing it. Priya spoke first. Are we ready for this? I looked around at them. Every person who had taken a chance on me. Young, under-recognized, burning with the kind of ambition that never quite fit inside Harper's boardroom. I nodded. No, but we're doing it anyway. What followed was a storm. Legal prep, research requests, long nights, and impossible documents. We worked in shifts, slept in the office sometimes. The cleaning crew started leaving snacks with notes. You're inspiring us. I hadn't felt so alive in years. But I also hadn't felt so exposed, because behind the excitement was the constant reminder. If we lost this, it wouldn't just be a case. It would be our credibility, our shot, our name. One afternoon, I took a cab out to the waterfront near the Boston Harbor. It was raining lightly, that quiet drizzle that softens the edges of the city. I sat on a bench overlooking the gray, endless water and opened my phone to reread that whistleblower's email. They said the sickness was just coincidence, but my daughter was healthy before the water changed. Please, don't let this be buried. I pressed the phone to my chest. I didn't need Harper's blessing. I didn't need James's approval. I just needed to win, not for me, but for her. We filed the initial motion 2 weeks later. The legal world buzzed within hours. Liberty Legal was on the radar now, and not everyone was clapping. One blog headline read, "Upstart law firm takes aim at multinational Goliath, ambitious or suicidal." I printed it and pinned it to the break room wall. Our case strategy centered around 4 pillars: regulatory violation, internal fraud, suppressed health data, and executive negligence. It was airtight, or close. But there were holes we'd have to patch as we moved. Late one night, I stayed in the office after everyone else had gone. The floors creaked under my heels. Our conference room was lit by just one desk lamp, casting long shadows across our hand-sketched trial map. I stood in front of it, marker in hand, making notes on cross-examination tactics when a voice broke the silence. "You always did like working alone." I turned slowly. James stood in the doorway. My first instinct was disbelief, then caution. "What are you doing here?" I asked. He stepped inside like he belonged there, like nothing had happened. "I heard you were going after KRG. That's bold." I stared at him. "Bold enough to scare you?" He smiled, but not with his eyes. "Just concerned. This case could crush you, Emily. It's bigger than anything you've ever handled." I kept my voice calm. "It's bigger than anything you've ever let me handle." He walked up to the whiteboard, reading our scribbles. "You really think you can take them down?" I met his gaze. "I don't have to think. I know." He looked at me for a long moment, then said quietly, Dad still thinks you'll come to your senses, that this is a phase. My jaw clenched. Then tell Dad I hope he's wearing his best tie, because I'll be standing across from him in court. James didn't reply. Just studied me like he was seeing something new, or something he'd missed for too long. Good luck, Em, he finally said. You'll need it. When he was gone, I stood alone for a long time, but I didn't feel small anymore. I felt ready. That week, we received confirmation of the trial date, federal court, 6 weeks out. I called a press conference the next day, just before sunrise, outside the courthouse steps, and I stepped behind the microphone. Camera flashes, reporters murmuring. A light breeze tugging at my blazer as I faced the crowd and took a breath. My name is Emily Harper, founder and managing partner of Liberty Legal. Today, we filed suit against KRG International for human rights and environmental violations. A pause. This case is about truth, about justice, about standing where others walked away. And in the sea of faces, I thought, just for a moment, I saw Olivia standing beneath an umbrella, smiling. I stepped down from the podium and into the fray. I'd picked the fight. Now it was time to make it count. The morning of the press conference, I woke before my alarm. Boston was still dark outside my apartment window, the skyline traced only by the distant glow of street lamps and blinking red antenna lights. For a moment, everything was still, the kind of stillness you feel before a storm hits, or just after something inside you finally stops breaking. I stood in front of my closet for too long. There was no dress code for defiance, but I knew how this worked. Optics mattered. I chose a tailored navy suit, sharp at the shoulders, a nod to every courtroom I'd ever been told I was too cold in, a white blouse with a soft drape, not stiff, not meek, clean lines, clean slate. I tied my hair back low, looked myself in the mirror, and said the words out loud. You earned this. I wasn't sure if I believed it yet, but I said it again. By the time we reached the courthouse steps, the sun had started rising behind us. Pale gold streaks filtered through the clouds, glinting off the Liberty Legal logo on the backdrop our team had set up at dawn. A podium, 2 microphones, a banner that read, Liberty Legal, Truth Has Power. Our entire team stood behind me, Priya, Anna, Marcus, the interns who'd become warriors in 2 months flat. Olivia stood just off to the side, arms crossed, face unreadable but eyes locked on me. I stepped up to the mic. Camera shutters clicked. News vans lined the curb. A reporter from the Boston Globe already had a notepad out. My name is Emily Harper, I began, voice steady. I'm the founder and managing partner of Liberty Legal, a new firm dedicated to giving power back to the overlooked and silenced. We're here because some fights are too important to ignore, even when others walk away. I took a breath. Today, we are proud to announce that Liberty Legal is representing a coalition of international whistleblowers in a class action lawsuit against KRG International for environmental violations, medical negligence, and corporate suppression. This case is not just about damages, it's about justice. Murmurs rose from the crowd, and then, for a beat, silence. It stretched just long enough for doubt to creep in before the applause began, scattered at first, then louder. Olivia stepped forward and touched my shoulder. Well done, she said. You didn't blink. That night, the press exploded. Harvard Law Journal published a feature. From heir to rebel, Emily Harper declares war on old money legal power. On Twitter, a legal blogger with 50,000 followers tweeted, Emily Harper just did what half the bar only dreams about. She broke free, and she named names. And somewhere in a Beacon Hill penthouse, my father was watching, James too. I didn't have to wait long for the fallout. The next day, Harper & Sons sent out a press release. We respect the rights of all attorneys to pursue their independent vision. While we chose not to engage in litigation against KRG for strategic reasons, we wish Ms. Harper the best in her new endeavor. Translation? We underestimated her, but were not ready to admit it. I read it twice, then closed the browser. It wasn't the denial that hurt, it was the condescension. But something in me had changed, because I didn't cry, I didn't shake, I just smiled. We spent the next week fielding interview requests, vetting new client inquiries, and watching Liberty's social following skyrocket. At one point, Priya leaned over her laptop and said, "You know we're trending, right?" I blinked. Trending? I laughed. Actually laughed. We'd become a symbol. And for the first time, I didn't feel like an imposter. I felt like a leader. Still, not everyone was cheering. That Friday, I found an envelope in our mailroom. No return address. Inside, a printed article from a right-wing business blog tearing me apart. A spoiled legacy child weaponizing victimhood for clout. I read it once, folded it back up, tossed it in the recycling bin. Then I opened my laptop and drafted a motion. Because I knew the next phase wasn't press conferences or tweets, it was court. And court was my battlefield. The following Monday, we walked into the federal courthouse. High ceilings, cold marble floors, echoes of every case that came before us still lingering in the air. I paused in front of the bronze plaque etched with the names of presiding judges. My stomach twisted. Then I saw her name. Judge Evelyn Carter. Sharp, fair. Known for ruling on integrity more than intimidation. I'd clerked under her for one semester in law school. She'd once told me, "Don't let the men in the room teach you how to be quiet." Now she'd be hearing our case. Inside the courtroom, I set my files on the table. Across from us, the defense attorneys from KRG took their places. Crisp suits, practiced smiles, everything calculated to look calm. But I saw the twitch in the lead counsel's jaw when he glanced at me. He'd expected a headline, not a fight. Judge Carter entered. "All rise." As I stood, hands steady on the polished oak, I saw something flicker in her eyes when they landed on me. Not familiarity, something better. Respect. We hadn't even opened arguments yet, but I knew in that moment they were going to hear us. They were going to hear me, and I was ready. It would be about proving they were wrong to ever doubt it. The air inside the courtroom was cool and dry, the kind of sterile that made you forget to breathe until you heard your own voice bounce back off the walls. The jury sat stone-faced. 12 strangers, professionals, retirees, a college kid, all staring at me with the impossible expectation of truth. I was standing at the lectern, palms open, voice clear. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," I began, "what you've heard over these last 3 weeks isn't just corporate negligence. It's betrayal. It's a company choosing silence over safety, and people paid for that choice with their health, and in some cases, their lives." I let the silence settle. Then I stepped forward, just slightly. "You saw the emails. You read the falsified logs. You heard the testimony from whistleblowers who risked everything to speak the truth. And now it's your turn. Your voice matters." A pause, then one final sentence. "Let it be the voice that protects those who were never meant to speak." I sat down slowly. My hands didn't shake. Across the room, KRG's lead counsel shuffled papers like he was stalling time. He looked at me once, and I saw it. That flicker of something he hadn't expected, respect, or maybe fear. The jury filed out. We waited. 3 hours. I spent them pacing the hallway outside, jacket off, sleeves rolled, breath caught somewhere behind my ribs. Priya sat cross-legged on the bench, chewing on her pen cap. Anna stared at the tiled floor, whispering the same phrase over and over. "We did our job. We did our job." And we had. No part of me doubted the case. Only the system. At 4:43 p.m., the bailiff called us back in. I walked in first, sat down, folded my hands. 12 people re-entered the room, faces unreadable. The foreperson stood. "We, the jury, find the defendant, KRG International, liable on all counts." The rest came in a blur. The judge's voice confirming the damages, the murmurs in the gallery, the sharp buzz of disbelief from the defense table. I didn't cry. I didn't smile. I just sat still as the words echoed, "Liable on all counts." That was it. We'd won. Outside, the world had already found out. Reporters swarmed the courthouse steps. Liberty Legal defeats corporate giant. Harper & Sons rival secures landmark judgment. Who is Emily Harper? I stood in front of the crowd again, this time with a new kind of weight in my chest. Not fear, not adrenaline, pride. "This verdict isn't just a win for our clients," I told the cameras. "It's a message that even the biggest corporations are not above accountability. That truth can speak louder than money, that justice, when pursued relentlessly, still matters." Behind me, Judge Evelyn Carter had paused in the courthouse doorway. She met my gaze briefly, then gave a slow, near imperceptible nod before disappearing inside. A single gesture, but it landed like a crown. That evening, the firm gathered in our tiny office, champagne bottles on the filing cabinets, jackets slung over chairs, laughter erupting like a release valve finally lifted. We toasted in paper cups, to the team, to the case, to liberty. And when the laughter died down, Priya raised her glass one last time. "To Emily," she said, "for building a firm where we're not just legal minds, we're voices that finally get to be heard." I felt my throat tighten, just a little. After they left, I stayed behind. The office was quiet again, the soft hum of city life outside the windows, my heels off, my hair unpinned. I sat at my desk, barefoot, legs tucked beneath me, reading the verdict one more time. It still felt unreal. My phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "Congratulations. You've built something real. Daniel Cohen." My breath caught. Daniel Cohen was one of Harper & Sons' legacy clients, a name whispered with reverence in every boardroom I'd ever entered. I stared at the screen, heart beginning to race. Then a second message. "Let's talk. I'm looking for representation that understands integrity." I set the phone down slowly. It wasn't just a win, it was a shift, the kind that cracks foundations. I didn't need Harper's empire, because I was building my own. But just as that thought settled in, another message came in, this time from a different number. "Margaret. Your father's not himself. Can we talk?" My chest went still. No congratulations, no preamble, just 6 words that threw me backward into a part of myself I thought I'd left behind. My father. I hadn't seen him since the press conference, not in court, not in the media. He'd gone quiet, the way mountains do before they slide, and now he was slipping. I stared at the message, thumb hovering. For weeks I'd been fighting ghosts, fighting legacies, but what happens when the ghosts start fading? When the man you once wanted so desperately to prove yourself to is no longer the same man? I closed my eyes and leaned back in my chair, the weight of both victory and memory pressing on my chest. I had built something new, but the old was calling, and I didn't know if I was ready to answer. The headlines didn't stop. Liberty Legal topples Goliath. Emily Harper's bold gamble pays off. The new face of American law? My name was everywhere. In podcasts, op-eds, even a late-night monologue where a comedian joked, "Harper & Sons just got daughtered." The firm's inbox exploded. Some messages were from aspiring lawyers asking for internships. Some were from new clients, but others were from people inside the walls I used to call home. People still at Harper & Sons. Quiet congratulations, subtle emojis. A single line, they're in free fall. At first I didn't believe it, then I saw the numbers. A leaked internal memo revealed 3 key clients were exploring exits. One of them, Daniel Cohen, made it official. I met with him personally, sitting across from him in a mahogany-paneled private dining room while he tapped his fingers thoughtfully against his water glass. "You're hungry, Harper," he said, and smart enough to know how not to get drunk on it. That's rare. He extended his hand. Just like that, we signed our biggest client to date. That night, I sat in my apartment, lights dimmed, sipping tea I never quite finished. The glow of the city pulsed through my windows. A thunderstorm rolled somewhere in the distance, the kind that felt far off but inevitable. And I realized I wasn't chasing anyone anymore. I wasn't trying to be seen. I had become impossible to ignore. But then came the message from Margaret. "Your father's not himself. Can we talk?" I stared at it for 10 minutes before replying. "Is it serious?" She responded instantly. I wouldn't have reached out if it weren't. We met the next day at a small cafe on Commonwealth Avenue. Neutral ground, neutral tone. Margaret was already there when I arrived, stirring cream into her coffee even though she never drank it with cream. Her hands looked smaller than I remembered, more fragile. She stood to hug me but stopped herself. Instead, she gestured toward the seat across from her. "Thanks for coming," she said, voice tight. I sat slowly. "What's going on?" She glanced around, lowered her voice. "Your father, he's slipping, his memory, focus. He's always been forgetful with names, but now he's forgetting meetings, Deadlines, conversations we had 10 minutes ago. I felt something twist in my stomach. Is it official? She nodded. The doctors suspect early-onset vascular dementia, but he won't get tested. He says it's just stress. I looked down at my hands. Why tell me now? Because whether he'll admit it or not, he still sees you as part of this, part of the family, even if he doesn't say it. I laughed softly, bitter. He didn't say it when I begged for a seat at the table, or when he watched James take credit for my work. Margaret's eyes filled, not dramatic tears, but the kind that gather and don't fall. The kind you learn to blink back after decades of disappointment. I know, she said. I let it happen too. I thought I was protecting him, the legacy, but we failed you. She didn't say it like a confession. She said it like a surrender. I couldn't speak for a moment. Outside, the wind tossed spring blossoms across the pavement. Pedestrians passed by with umbrellas, their faces a blur of hurried errands and casual normalcy. I whispered, he told me once I was too intense, that clients preferred James. Margaret closed her eyes. That was projection. He saw himself in James, charming, smooth, but he feared the things in you that he didn't understand. Like? Truth, she said. Conviction, a refusal to perform. We sat in silence for a long time. Then she pulled something from her bag, a letter, handwritten, folded once. He started writing this after the verdict. He never finished it, but I think you should have it. I took it slowly. His handwriting, still angular and precise, filled the page. Emily, they say you stood on those courthouse steps and made them listen. I didn't think you'd go through with it, but you did. And part of me hated you for it, because you proved what I spent my whole life ignoring, that sometimes the best leader isn't the loudest or the most comfortable or the most liked. Sometimes it's the one brave enough to walk away from everything to do what's right. You didn't just build a firm, you built a future, and whether I was part of it or not, I see you now. Dad. I read it twice, then I folded it carefully and slid it back into the envelope. I looked up at Margaret. He never gave this to me? He was going to, he just forgot where he put it. The weight of those words landed like a stone in my chest, not out of cruelty, out of loss. He was fading, and for the first time, I didn't feel vindicated. I felt tired. We left the cafe side by side. She squeezed my arm at the corner and walked away before I could say anything. I watched her go, straight-backed, graceful, a woman who had spent her life holding together something brittle. I stood there for a long while, then I turned and walked the opposite direction. Later that evening, Priya called. Her voice was buzzing. You need to see this, she said. We just passed 500,000 site visits this week. And guess who reached out? Who? A law school in D.C. They want you to speak at their graduation. Keynote. I leaned against the kitchen counter, phone warm in my hand, that strange ache still blooming behind my ribs. That's a lot, I said. Yeah, she said. It is. I promised I'd call her back. Then I poured a glass of water, sat on my bed, and opened my father's letter again. Maybe he didn't say the words when I needed them most. But maybe part of healing wasn't getting the apology on time. Maybe it was choosing what to do with it once it came. I set the letter on my nightstand and looked out at the city lights beyond my window. I had risen higher than they ever expected, but now came the real question. Could I face them? Not as the daughter who once begged for a seat, but as the woman who no longer needed it? It was strange walking up the front steps of the house I once called home. The stone path hadn't changed. The garden still held the same boxwoods and cold roses my mother had trimmed obsessively. The brass handle on the front door was polished, just like always, but for the first time, I didn't feel like I had to shine before touching it. I was already enough. Margaret answered before I knocked. Her expression was careful, like she wasn't sure who she was about to open the door to, a daughter or a rival. Hi, I said softly. Hi, she replied, stepping back. Come in. The house smelled the same, lemon wood polish and something faintly floral, like dried lavender tucked in too many corners. My heels echoed on the hardwood, just like they had when I was a teenager sneaking in late from debate club. Only this time, I wasn't sneaking. This time, I'd been summoned. He was in the study. Margaret led me through the hall with silent gestures, as if the house itself could break under the wrong tone. James was already inside, leaning against the fireplace, arms crossed. He didn't say anything. Neither did I. William Harper sat in his leather chair by the window. Sunlight haloed around him, catching in the silver threads of his hair. He looked older than I remembered, smaller, as if time had finally started collecting its dues. He looked up at me, blinking once. "Emily." His voice was softer than I expected, thin almost. "Dad," I said, holding my ground. He gestured to the chair across from him. I didn't sit. Not yet. He studied me like he was still trying to decide who I'd become, or maybe, for the first time, realizing it was never his decision to make. "You've made quite the splash," he said finally. "That's one way to put it." He nodded slowly. "You embarrassed us." I let out a breath. Not a sigh, just a slow release of pressure. "No," I said. "You embarrassed yourselves. I just stopped covering for it." James shifted at the fireplace, his jaw tightening, but he didn't speak. Margaret sat down quietly on the couch, hands folded in her lap, eyes on the floor. William leaned back in his chair. "You were always relentless, even as a child. You wanted answers when there were none. You wanted reasons for things that just were." "No," I replied. "I wanted fairness, and you called it intensity." He looked away. "I was proud of you," he said. "When?" He didn't answer. I stepped closer. "You missed my graduation. You let James take credit for my work. You watched me give everything to the firm and still chose him to lead it." His mouth opened, then closed. "I didn't destroy the family legacy," I said. "I outgrew it." He flinched slightly, not from pain but from impact. James finally spoke. "So what now? You win a case and suddenly you're back here to play queen?" I turned toward him. "I'm not here to play anything. I came because Margaret asked me to, because Dad's forgetting things, and because I deserve to say what I never got the chance to." He scoffed. "You got your moment. You got the press, the applause, the clients, and none of it was about you," I snapped. "Maybe that's why it stings." James stepped forward. "I protected the firm. You protected yourself, and you used me to do it. For years." The silence after that was heavy. I turned back to William. "I didn't need you to hand me the keys," I said, "but I deserved honesty, acknowledgement, something." He looked at me for a long time. His lips parted. Then, like a light dimming behind his eyes, he blinked, slowly, distantly, and just like that, he was gone. Not physically, but wherever he'd retreated to, I couldn't reach him. Margaret stood, her face crumpled slightly. "This happens sometimes. He slips," she whispered. I nodded, throat tight. I crouched next to his chair and placed the letter, the one he wrote but never gave me, on the side table. "I read it," I said softly. "Thank you." Even if it came too late. His gaze drifted toward the garden, unfocused. I stood and faced them both. "I'm not here to take anything back," I said, "and I don't want revenge. I have a life now, one that doesn't revolve around earning scraps of approval." Margaret stepped forward, voice shaking. "We were wrong, all of us, and we can't undo it, but I hope you'll let us try to be something." I looked at her. The woman who had stood quietly next to power for so long, finally asking for connection instead of control. "I'll think about it," I said, "but it starts with truth. No more pretending nothing happened." She nodded. I turned toward the door. Before I reached it, James called after me. "You're really not coming back, are you?" I paused. "No," I said, "but that doesn't mean I'm gone." Then I walked out, into the sun, into the city, into the version of myself I never needed them to approve of. Later that evening, I stood in Liberty Legal's empty conference room. The blinds were drawn, the lights dim. The only sound was the quiet hum of the air conditioning and the distant rush of traffic beyond the glass. I opened my laptop to a new email from Harvard Law School. Subject, guest lecturer, invitation, spring term. I closed it, not because I wasn't interested, but because something bigger was waiting, an idea, a seed, a legacy that didn't begin or end with Harper. It would be about what I was building for those who'd come after me. And one message in particular was about to change everything. It started with 12 women and a folding table. No press, no photographers, no grand declarations. Just a Friday evening, 1 pizza box, 2 pots of coffee, and 12 law students squeezed into the Liberty Legal Conference Room, their notebooks open, their eyes bright, their questions raw. They called the program Rise Up. The name wasn't my idea. It came from a second-year student named Layla who said, "We're not just trying to climb, we're trying to rise together." That night, as I listened to them speak about being interrupted in class, talked over in internships, underestimated in mock trials, I saw reflections of the woman I had once been, hungry, hopeful, waiting for someone to say, "I see you." So I said it, to each of them. "You don't have to wait to be chosen," I told them. "You already are." Word spread faster than we were ready for. By month's end, our inbox was flooded with requests, students from across the country asking how they could attend the next Rise Up session, professors offering to sponsor travel, attorneys volunteering to mentor. We didn't have enough chairs, so we rented a larger space downtown, a renovated warehouse with exposed beams, uneven floors, and warm amber lights that turned every workshop into something that felt like home. And still, they came. One by one, they filled the room. Young women of every background, mothers returning to law after raising kids, first-generation students, women whose voices had always been a little too loud for the classrooms they were told to shrink inside. In those sessions, we didn't just talk about case law or trial prep. We talked about courage, how to walk into a room and not apologize for it, how to say no without explanation, how to build something that no one could take from you, not because you asked for permission, but because you dared to try. One afternoon, Olivia and I sat at the back of the room as a panel of mentees led the session without us. Olivia leaned over and whispered, "You know what this is?" I smiled. "A beginning?" She shook her head. "A ripple, one that's going to outlast all of us." At night, I still worked late, contracts, case reviews, strategy decks, but it felt different now. Less like climbing, more like rooting, growing, creating a place not just for me, but for the next wave. Recognition came quickly. The New York Times called Rise Up the most important shift in legal mentorship this decade. Forbes named me in their top 50 women rewriting the rules of business. And when I spoke at a national conference in D.C., I stood on stage before 3,000 people and told them, "You can't measure power by proximity to the old table. You build a new one, and you make it longer." They stood. But the moment that moved me most didn't happen in a conference hall or a courtroom. It happened on a quiet Tuesday morning in our office kitchen. I was refilling my coffee when Priya walked in holding her phone. "You got something," she said, handing it to me. It was a text from James. "Proud of you, sis." Just that. No punctuation, no strings. But it stunned me all the same. I stared at it, unsure whether to respond or let it be what it was, a quiet bridge across the distance we'd built. A moment later, a second text appeared. "Dad asks about you. Sometimes he forgets we spoke yesterday, but he remembers your name. That's something, right?" I set the phone down gently. For a long time, I hadn't let myself grieve him. Not just the father he was now, but the one I'd spent years hoping he'd become. But maybe healing didn't require both people to be present. Maybe it started when one person decided to stop needing the apology and just lived. That weekend, I visited him for the first time since the letter. He didn't recognize me at first, called me Margaret. But then, as I was leaving, he looked at me with sudden clarity. "You always had her eyes," he said, "but her fire, that's yours." I turned back, stunned. He smiled faintly. "You're doing something good, aren't you?" "I'm trying," I said. He nodded once, slow. "Don't stop." It was the last full sentence I'd ever hear him say, but it was enough. Back at the office, we prepared for the next Rise Up expansion. West Coast cities, new partners, a possible podcast. Olivia and I sat in my office, maps and proposals spread across the table. "You could take this national," she said. "Global, even." I looked out the window, the Boston skyline glittering like a promise. "I don't want it to be mine," I said. "I want it to be ours. Something no one person can take credit for. Something that lives beyond me." She nodded. And for the first time in a long time, I believed it was possible. But just as I leaned back in my chair, a notification flashed on my phone. An email. Subject, merger offer. Jansen & Gray, LLP. I opened it. My breath caught. They were offering a buyout of Liberty Legal. Full integration. My team would be absorbed, our brand folded into theirs. A hefty payout, long-term equity, a seat at the table, the very table I had once dreamed of. But as I read through the offer, something inside me stirred. Not doubt exactly. Something deeper. Because the table looked impressive, but it wasn't mine, and I wasn't sure I wanted a seat at someone else's table, now that I'd finally built one of my own. I closed the email without responding. Then I looked up at the wall where our first team photo still hung. Lopsided, slightly blurry, taken in the chaos of our first case win. We looked exhausted and alive. I picked up my phone, typed a message to Olivia. Big offer just came in, but I think I already know my answer. She replied a minute later. Then say it out loud. Let's make it real. And I did. But not to her. I stood, walked to the window, and whispered into the city below, I'm not done. Because the fight was never just about winning a verdict. It was about choosing yourself, again and again, even when the world keeps asking you not to, even when the offer seemed too good to refuse. The night before I gave them my answer, I stood alone on the balcony of my apartment, barefoot, wrapped in an old cardigan, a glass of red wine in one hand. Below, the city pulsed, headlights weaving through the streets, a siren in the distance, laughter rising from a rooftop I couldn't see. Boston looked like a place that had finally made room for me, but the truth was, I'd stopped waiting for space to open. I carved it, brick by brick, case by case. The email from Jansen & Gray was still unread, still bold in my inbox. I hadn't opened it since that first glance. Didn't need to. I already knew what it said. The numbers, the pitch, the promises, a generous payout, full integration, prestige, and of course their golden hook, a permanent partner seat on our strategic leadership board. 10 years ago, that would have been the dream, a seat at the table that had once shut me out. But now I had something better, my own table, one I built from ashes and ache. The next morning, I walked into Liberty Legal, calm and certain. The office hummed with quiet momentum, phones ringing, keyboards tapping, interns navigating folders taller than they were. Our team had outgrown our first floor. We'd taken over the one above it, too. We were becoming something real. Olivia met me at the elevator, coffee in hand. Well? She asked, tilting her head. I'm staying, I said. Her smile was slow and knowing. Good. I was going to talk you out of it if you said yes. I know, I laughed. That's why I didn't. We walked together to the glass-walled boardroom, where Priya and the senior team were already gathered. Layla, one of our original Rise Up mentees, now a full-time associate, pulled up a slide deck titled Liberty Expansion, Phase 2. I sat at the head of the table and looked around. Every face was one I had chosen, not for convenience, for conviction. I let them lead the meeting, because leadership wasn't just about talking. It was about listening, trusting, empowering. Later that afternoon, after the final signatures on a new client deal, I stepped into my office and closed the door. I opened my laptop and began to write. Not a brief, not a business plan, a letter to no one, and to everyone. There was a time I thought power came from being invited in, that success meant being chosen, named, approved. I chased it like oxygen, and every time it slipped, I blamed myself. Now I know better. Power is not inherited. It is built, quietly, fiercely, and often in defiance of everything that says you shouldn't. I was never meant to lead Harper & Sons, because I was meant to build liberty. And the legacy I leave behind won't be a name on a door. It'll be the voices I helped raise, the women I taught to speak without shrinking, the men I taught to listen. This isn't revenge, it's reclamation. That weekend, we hosted the first Rise Up Summit, a 2-day event that brought mentees, alumni, and partners together from across the country. The energy inside the Boston venue was electric, laughter echoing through high ceilings, panels and workshops unfolding in every room, and a keynote from a woman I once mentored who was now launching her own firm in Texas. During the closing session, Layla took the stage. She held up a small plaque. It read, "Your power was never theirs to give." "This is for Emily Harper," she said, her voice shaking slightly, "for giving us more than guidance, for giving us a mirror." They asked me to speak. I didn't use notes. "I used to think the most powerful thing I could do was prove myself to people who never saw me," I said. "But now I know. The most powerful thing is choosing yourself again and again, even when the world tells you you're wrong for doing it." Applause rose like a wave. That night, back home, I poured another glass of wine and sat on the floor with my laptop open beside me, not working, just thinking. A text came in from Margaret. "Dinner Sunday? Just us. No expectations." I stared at it for a moment, then replied, "Yes, I'd like that." Outside, the wind stirred the trees. I stood, walked to the balcony, and breathed in the city, its lights, its grit, its quiet hum. I remembered that first night after I left Harper and Sons, how uncertain I'd felt, how furious, how scared. And now I stood taller. Not because the fear was gone, but because I had learned how to carry it without letting it carry me. You don't have to be chosen to lead. You don't have to be loved to matter. You don't have to be invited to build something that lasts. And if no one hands you the legacy you deserve, you create your own. Have you ever had to fight for your place, in a family, a workplace, or even in your own mind? Have you ever walked away from the approval you were told you needed, only to find something better? If this story spoke to you, share it. Share your voice, share your truth, and most of all, share your power. Because your legacy isn't what you inherit. It's what you create when you stop waiting for permission. And the moment you do, everything changes.